They left her in the dark. Maren didn't cry when the carriage door slammed shut, didn't cry when the wheels rattled away into the night, taking with them the only family she'd ever known. Didn't cry when silence fell over the road, leaving her alone before the massive iron gates of the Lycan king's castle. She'd stopped crying years ago. Tears were a luxury poor girls couldn't afford. The note was still crumpled in her fist. She didn't need to read it again. She'd memorized every cruel word on the 3-day journey. To the Lycan king, our village owes a debt we cannot pay. We offer this girl instead. She is healthy and young. Do with her as you will. We will not come back for her. No name. No explanation. Just a body delivered like livestock, left at the gate in the middle of the night, because her village couldn't scrape together enough coin to satisfy a tax debt. Maren smoothed her threadbare dress and lifted her chin. The gates loomed before her. Black iron twisted into shapes of running wolves, at least 20 feet high. Beyond them, the castle rose against the starless sky like a shadow given form. She should knock, should announce herself, should do something other than stand here shivering in the cold. Instead, she sank to her knees on the frozen ground, wrapped her arms around herself, and waited for dawn. There was no point in rushing toward whatever fate awaited her. No point in pretending she had any control over what came next. She'd been sold, abandoned, left like garbage at the gates of a monster. All she could do now was survive. The hours passed slowly. Maren drifted in and out of a restless sleep, jerking awake whenever the wind howled or an animal cried in the distance. The cold seeped into her bones. Her fingers went numb. Her lips turned blue. She'd survived this. She'd survived worse. When the first pale light of dawn touched the horizon, Maren lifted her head and froze. The gates were open, and the Lycan king stood before her. He was nothing like the monster from the stories. No fangs dripping with blood, no eyes glowing with hellfire. Just a man, impossibly tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar and a face carved from granite. He wore simple clothes, no crown, no finery. Nothing to mark him as royalty except the absolute stillness of his presence. And his eyes, amber and gold, watching her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. "How long have you been here?" His voice was deep, quiet, not angry, something else she couldn't name. Maren's throat was too frozen to speak. She held up the crumpled note instead, her hand trembling. The king took it, read it. Something flickered across his face, there and gone before she could identify it. "They left you in the night." It wasn't a question. "In the cold, at my gates, like you were nothing." She wanted to say, "I am nothing." Wanted to say they were right to leave me. Wanted to say all the things she'd been taught to believe about herself. Instead, she just nodded. The king crouched down, bringing himself to her level. This close, she could feel the heat radiating from him, warmth that cut through the frozen numbness in her bones. Her wolf, dormant for so long she'd forgotten it existed, suddenly stirred. "Mate?" Something whispered in the back of her mind. "Mate. Mate. Mate." Impossible. She crushed the thought before it could take root. She was a poor girl from a dying village, worth less than the paper they'd written her away on. The king's mate would be someone powerful, someone worthy, someone who wasn't shivering in the dirt like a discarded dog. "Can you stand?" the king asked. Maren tried. Her legs buckled beneath her. Before she could hit the ground, Arms caught her, strong and warm and impossibly gentle. The king lifted her like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. "You're half frozen," he said, and there was something rough in his voice, something that sounded almost like anger. "How long were you out here?" "Hours?" Since midnight." Her voice came out as a croak. "The carriage left at midnight." His jaw tightened. "They left you in the cold for 6 hours, in the dead of winter, without a coat, without shelter, without—" He stopped, breathed. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled. "What's your name?" "Maren." "Maren." He said it slowly, like he was memorizing the shape of it. "I'm Kyle, and I need you to know something." She waited, bracing herself for the worst, for the price, for the demand, for whatever payment he would extract from her worthless body. "Whatever you were told about why you're here, whatever debt they claimed to be paying, it doesn't matter." His amber eyes held hers, burning with an intensity that made her shiver for reasons that had nothing to do with cold. "You are not property. You are not payment. You are not nothing." Maren stared at him. No one had ever said those words to her. No one had ever looked at her like she mattered. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will." He turned and carried her through the open gates toward the castle that loomed against the brightening sky. "But first, you need to get warm. Food, rest. Everything else can wait." "You don't have to carry me. I can walk. I can—" "You can barely stand." His arms tightened around her, not possessive, but protective. "Let me help you, Maren. Just this once. Let someone help you." She should argue, should insist she was fine, should maintain the walls she'd built over 19 years of being told she was worthless. Instead, she let her head fall against his shoulder and closed her eyes. He was warm, so warm, and for reasons she didn't understand, she felt safe. Safer than she'd felt in years, safer than she'd ever felt in her village, surrounded by people who were supposed to be her family. "Why were you waiting?" she asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "At dawn. Why were you standing at the gates?" Kale was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was strange, rough. "Because I knew you were coming." "How?" "The note. They didn't send word ahead." "I didn't need a note." His arms held her closer. "I've been dreaming of you for 3 months, Maren. Every night. A woman with dark hair and sad eyes, standing at my gates in the cold, waiting for someone to find her." Her heart stuttered. "That's impossible." "I know." She could hear the smile in his voice, small, wondering. "And yet here you are, exactly as I dreamed, exactly as I knew you would be." Maren lifted her head to look at him. His amber eyes met hers, and something passed between them. A recognition, a connection, a thread of something she couldn't name pulling taut. "What does it mean?" she whispered. "I don't know." His thumb traced her shoulder through the thin fabric of her dress. "But I intend to find out. And whatever happens, whatever you've been told about your worth, I want you to know something." "What?" "I would have stood at those gates every dawn for the rest of my life." His voice was fierce, certain. "For as long as it took. Because some things are worth waiting for." He looked at her like she was one of those things, like she was worth waiting for. Maren didn't know how to respond, didn't know what to do with the warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with his body heat. So she just held on tighter and let him carry her home. She woke to warmth. For a long moment, Maren didn't move, didn't open her eyes, just lay still, trying to understand why she wasn't cold, why she wasn't hungry, why she wasn't curled on a thin straw mattress in the corner of a drafty cottage, waiting for someone to kick her awake and put her to work. Then memory returned, and her eyes flew open. The room was beautiful, overwhelming. A massive bed draped in cream and gold, soft as clouds beneath her. A fireplace crackling with warmth. Windows that let in pale winter sunlight. Paintings on the walls. Rugs on the floor. More luxury in this single room than she'd seen in her entire life. She sat up slowly, her head spinning. Someone had changed her clothes. The threadbare dress was gone, replaced by a soft nightgown of pale blue. Her hair had been washed. Her skin smelled of lavender and something sweet. The door opened. Kyle stood in the threshold, a tray balanced in his hands. He was dressed simply again. Dark trousers, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly. The sharp lines of his jaw, the faint silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, the way his amber eyes softened when they landed on her. "You're awake." He crossed the room and set the tray on the bedside table. "How do you feel?" "I don't know." Maren pulled the blankets higher, suddenly aware of how little the nightgown covered. "Where am I?" "Your chambers." He settled into a chair beside the bed, close enough to talk, far enough to not crowd her. "You've been asleep for nearly 14 hours. The healer said you were exhausted, malnourished, that you've probably been running on nothing but stubbornness for years." The assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Maren looked away. "I had the servants bring food," Kyle continued. "Soup, mostly. The healer said your stomach might not handle anything heavier, but there's bread too, and tea." Maren stared at the tray. Fresh bread. Real soup with vegetables and meat floating in it. A pot of tea that steamed gently. More food than she usually ate in 3 days. "I can't accept this." The words came out before she could stop them. "Whatever debt my village owed, this is too much. I should be working, earning my keep. I shouldn't be—" "Maren!" Kyle's voice was gentle but firm. "There is no debt. I told you, you're not payment for anything." "But the note was written by people who had no right to offer you." Something dark flickered in his eyes. "I've already sent word to your village. Their tax debt is forgiven, and they've been informed that if any of them ever try to contact you again, they'll answer to me personally." Maren's head spun. "You forgave their debt, but I'm not worth—" "You're worth far more than they could ever pay." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Maren?" She shook her head, afraid to speak. "I see a woman who survived 6 hours in freezing cold without complaining, who held up a crumpled note instead of begging for mercy, who looked at me, the Lycan king, the monster from the stories, and didn't flinch." His amber eyes held hers, burning with conviction. "I see strength. I see resilience. I see someone who was told she was worthless her entire life and somehow kept going anyway." Maren's throat tightened. "You don't know me." "No, but I'd like to." He gestured to the tray. "Eat, please. Let me take care of you just for today. You can go back to being strong and independent tomorrow." She should argue, should insist on working, should prove that she wasn't the burden everyone had always said she was. Instead, she reached for the soup. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Rich and warm and filling. She ate too fast, burning her tongue, but she couldn't make herself slow down. The bread was soft and fresh, The tea was sweet with honey. Kyle watched her without comment. When she finally set down the empty bowl, his expression was unreadable. "When was the last time you had a full meal?" he asked quietly. Maren thought about lying, decided against it. "I don't remember." Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or rage. Not at her, but at whatever circumstances had led her here. "That changes now," he said. "You'll eat 3 meals a day. Real meals. And if anyone in this castle tries to tell you otherwise, you come to me directly." "I don't understand why you're doing this." The words burst out of her, tangled with frustration and fear. "You're the king. You could have anything you want. Anyone you want. Why are you wasting time on a girl who showed up at your gates like a stray dog?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and withdrew something, a folded piece of paper, worn soft with handling. "Do you know what this is?" Maren shook her head. 3 months ago, I woke from a dream." He unfolded the paper carefully. "I'd seen a woman. Dark hair, sad eyes, standing at my gates in the cold, waiting for dawn." He turned the paper toward her. "I drew her, because I couldn't get her face out of my head, because I knew, somehow, that she was important." Maren looked at the drawing and stopped breathing. It was her. Not a rough sketch, but a detailed portrait, her face exactly as she'd seen it in mirrors, her eyes with the sadness she'd never been able to hide, her hair, tangled and dark, even the shape of her jaw, the curve of her lips. "Every night for 3 months, I dreamed of you," Kale continued. "Sometimes you were at the gates. Sometimes you were in a field, or by a river, or standing in a room I didn't recognize. But it was always you, always the same face, always the same feeling." "What feeling?" "Recognition." His voice was rough. "Like I'd been waiting for you my whole life. Like you were something I'd lost and was finally finding again." Maren's heart was pounding. "What does it mean?" "The old texts call it a soul bond, a connection that forms before birth, across lives, across centuries. 2 people tied together by something deeper than choice." He met her eyes, and his expression was open, vulnerable. "They say when you meet your soul's match, you know. Not because of logic or reason, but because every part of you recognizes them." "You think I'm—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I think you showed up at my gates, exactly as I dreamed you would. I think my wolf has been restless for 3 months and went quiet the moment I saw you. I think I've been alive for 200 years, and I've never felt anything like what I feel when I look at you." He reached out, slowly, and took her hand. His touch was warm, gentle. "I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be." Maren stared at their joined hands. His fingers were so much larger than hers. His palm was calloused from sword work. And yet he held her like she was something precious, something fragile. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to trust, how to believe that this isn't a trick." "Then let me earn it." Kale's thumb traced across her knuckles. "Stay, as my guest, not a servant, not a payment. My guest. Let me show you what it feels like to be valued, to be safe, to be wanted." "For how long?" "For as long as you'll let me." His amber eyes held hers, steady and sure. "I've waited 3 months for you, Maren. I've waited 200 years for something real. A little longer won't break me." She should say no, should run, should protect herself from the inevitable disappointment. But his hand was warm in hers, and his eyes were kind. And for the first time in 19 years, someone was looking at her like she mattered. "Okay," she breathed. "I'll stay." Cale's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Good," he said. "That's a start." The nightmare came on the fifth night. It was always the same. The village square. The faces of people she'd known her entire life, twisted with contempt. The elder reading from a scroll, listing her crimes. Being born poor. Being orphaned young. Being a mouth to feed when there wasn't enough food to go around. "We have decided," the elder said in her dream. "You will pay what we cannot." And then the hands. Rough. Careless. Dragging her toward the waiting carriage while she screamed and no one came to help. No one cared. She wasn't a person to them, just a problem being solved. Maren woke, gasping, her hands fisted in silk sheets, her heart slamming against her ribs. The fire had burned low. Shadows pressed in from every corner, and for a moment she was back there, being loaded into the carriage like cargo, watching her village shrink into the distance, knowing that no one would miss her. A knock at the door, soft, careful. "Maren?" Kyle's voice. She should tell him she was fine, should send him away, should prove that she didn't need anyone. "Come in," she heard herself say. The door opened. Kyle stood in the threshold wearing loose sleep clothes, his dark hair dishevelled. In the dim light, he looked less like a king and more like a man. Worried, uncertain, human. "I felt it," he said quietly. "Through the bond. Your fear." "I didn't make any noise." "You didn't have to." He crossed the room, but stopped several feet from the bed, always giving her space, always letting her choose. "The soul bond works both ways. When you're in pain, I feel the echo of it." Maren pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you." "Don't apologize." He settled onto the floor beside her bed. Not on it, not too close, just near. "Do you want to talk about it?" "There's nothing to talk about. Just memories." "Memories of what?" She was quiet for a long moment. She'd never told anyone the full truth. How the village had treated her. What it had felt like to grow up knowing you were unwanted. But Kyle was looking at her with those steady amber eyes, and the words started spilling out anyway. "My parents died when I was 3. Fever took them both in the same week. No one wanted another mouth to feed, so I was passed around. A few months here, a few months there. Wherever someone needed an extra pair of hands, badly enough to tolerate me." Cale's expression darkened. "You were a child." "I was a burden." The word came out flat, familiar. "That's what they called me. The village burden. The girl no one wanted." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I learned to make myself useful, to work harder than anyone else, to take up as little space as possible. I thought if I was good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, maybe someone would want to keep me." Did they? No. The truth hurt less than she expected. She'd made peace with it years ago. When the tax debt came due, I was the obvious choice. No family to protest, no one to miss me. Just the village burden, finally being useful. She felt the bed dip as Cale moved closer. When she looked up, he was sitting on the edge of the mattress, his amber eyes blazing with barely contained fury. "They were monsters," he said. "Every single one of them. They were poor, desperate, scared. That's not an excuse." His voice cracked on the word. "You were a child, Maren, an orphan. They should have protected you. Instead, They made you believe you were worthless, so they wouldn't feel guilty when they threw you away. Tears burned behind her eyes. She blinked them back. She hadn't cried in years. She wouldn't start now. I survived, she said. That's what matters. Surviving isn't the same as living. Kyle reached out, slowly, and took her hand. You've spent 19 years just trying to make it through each day, never being loved, never being wanted, never being seen as anything more than what you could do for other people. It's all I know. Then let me teach you something different. His thumb traced across her knuckles, achingly gentle. Let me show you what it feels like to be valued for who you are, not what you can provide. Let me prove that you deserve more than survival. Why? The word came out broken. Why do you care so much? We've known each other 5 days. I'm nobody. I'm nothing. You're everything. His voice was fierce, certain. You're the woman I dreamed of for 3 months. You're the person my soul recognized before I ever laid eyes on you. And even if none of that were true, even if there were no bond, no dreams, no destiny, I would still look at you and see someone extraordinary. Marin's breath caught. Kale, you survived 19 years of being told you were worthless, and you're still kind, still gentle, still capable of trusting even when trust has only ever gotten you hurt. He cupped her face in his free hand, tilting it toward his. That's not nothing, Marin. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen. She couldn't stop the tears anymore. They slipped down her cheeks, silent and hot, and she didn't have the strength to hide them. Kyle brushed them away with his thumbs. You're crying. I don't cry. The protest came out watery, useless. I stopped crying years ago. Maybe you needed to start again. He pulled her forward, wrapping his arms around her. She stiffened for a moment. No one had held her since she was 3 years old. And then she collapsed against his chest and let herself break. He held her while she sobbed, didn't speak, didn't demand anything. Just held her, one hand stroking her hair, his heartbeat steady against her ear. When the tears finally slowed, Marin pulled back just enough to look at him. His amber eyes were soft, warm, full of something she was afraid to name. I'm falling for you, she whispered, and it terrifies me, because everyone I've ever cared about has left. Everyone I've ever trusted has hurt me. And you're... I'm not going anywhere. He pressed his forehead to hers. I waited at those gates every dawn for 3 months because I knew you were coming. I would have waited 3 years, 3 decades, 3 centuries. His breath was warm against her skin. You're worth every second, Marin. You always have been. She tilted her face toward his. Their lips were inches apart. She could feel the tension in his body, the restraint coiled tight in every muscle. I want to kiss you, she breathed. I know. His voice was rough, strained. I want that too, more than I've wanted anything in 200 years. His hand slid into her hair, cradling the back of her head. But not tonight, not when you're hurting, not when you might regret it in the morning. I won't regret it. Then you won't regret it tomorrow either. He pressed a kiss to her forehead instead. Soft, reverent, full of promise. When I kiss you for the first time, I want you to be certain. I want you to know, truly know, that you're choosing me. Not because you're grateful or lonely or afraid. Because you want to. Something cracked open in her chest. A wall she'd built so carefully, over so many years of being unwanted. You're not like anyone I've ever met, she said. Good. His smile was soft in the darkness. I don't want to be like anyone else. I want to be yours. He held her until she fell asleep. And for the first time in 19 years, Maren dreamed of something other than pain. She dreamed of warmth, of safety, of amber eyes that looked at her like she was worth waiting for. She dreamed of home. They came for her on the 10th day. Maren was in the castle gardens when she heard the commotion. Raised voices at the gates, the clatter of horses, the sharp commands of guards. She set down the book she'd been reading and moved toward the sound, her heart already sinking with dread. She knew that voice. She'd heard it her whole life, issuing orders, making proclamations, deciding her fate without ever asking what she wanted. Elder Thorn, the man who had signed her away like livestock. She found them in the main courtyard. Cale stood at the center, flanked by his guards, his expression carved from ice. Before him, Elder Thorn and 3 village councilmen sat astride mud-splattered horses, their faces twisted with indignation. "This is an outrage!" Thorn was shouting. "The girl was given as payment for our debt. You had no right to keep her without honoring the terms." "The terms?" Cale's voice was soft, deadly. The terms were a piece of paper left with a half-frozen girl in the middle of the night. There were no negotiations, no agreements, just a body dumped at my gates like garbage. She was compensation. She was a person, and you threw her away because you couldn't be bothered to find another solution. Cale stepped forward, and Thorn's horse skittered backward. "Tell me, Elder, in all your deliberations about how to pay your debt, did anyone once ask Maren what she wanted?" Thorn sputtered. "She's an orphan, a burden. She had no right to." "She had every right." Cale's voice rose, carrying across the courtyard. "She had the right to warmth, to safety, to be treated as a human being instead of currency. You denied her all of those things. We want her back." Thorn's face had gone red with fury. "She belongs to our village. She was born there. She has obligations." "She has nothing." Cale's voice went cold. "She owes you nothing. You raised her as a burden, passed her from household to household, told her she was worthless so you wouldn't feel guilty when you sold her to a monster." He smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "Congratulations, Elder. I am that monster, and I'm keeping her." Maren's heart was pounding. She should stay hidden, should let Cale handle this, should remain invisible like she'd learned to be. Instead, she stepped into the courtyard. "Maren." Thorn's eyes locked onto her, relief and calculation warring in his expression. "Thank the gods. Tell them this has been a misunderstanding. Tell them you're coming home. Home." The word felt like a slap. "That place was never my home," she said. Thorn blinked. "What?" "You heard me." Maren walked forward, past the guards, past Cale, until she stood directly before the men who had shaped her entire life around their indifference. "I lived in your village for 19 years. I worked in your fields, cleaned your houses, minded your children. I did everything I was told, everything you demanded. And in return, you called me a burden, passed me around like an inconvenience. And when you needed something to trade, something worthless enough that no one would protest, you chose me. We were desperate. You were cruel." Her voice didn't waver. "You could have found another way. You could have asked for an extension on the debt. You could have pooled resources. You could have done anything except hand over a human being like she was nothing." Thorn's face contorted. "You ungrateful little—" "She doesn't owe you gratitude." Cale moved to stand beside her, his hand finding hers, warm, steady. She doesn't owe you anything. And if I ever see any of you on my lands again, if I ever hear that you've tried to contact her, threaten her, or claim any right to her, I will burn your village to the ground and salt the earth where it stood." The councilman went pale. Thorn's horse danced nervously beneath him. "You can't do this," Thorn said, but his voice had lost its fire. "She's ours." "She's not yours." Cale's voice rang across the courtyard. "She was never yours. And from this moment forward, she belongs to no one but herself." He turned to Maren, and his expression transformed. The ice melted, the fury banked, and underneath was something raw, something vulnerable. "Unless," he said quietly, "she chooses to belong somewhere, to someone." Maren's breath caught. The courtyard had gone silent. She could feel the weight of dozens of stares, guards, servants, the men who had come to reclaim her. But the only eyes she saw were amber and gold, looking at her like she was worth waiting for. "I spent my whole life wanting someone to choose me," she said, "wanting someone to look at me and see something worth keeping. I thought I had to earn it, that if I was good enough, quiet enough, useful enough, maybe someone would finally want me." "Maren." "I was wrong." She stepped closer to him, close enough to feel his warmth, close enough to see her own reflection in his eyes. "I don't have to earn the right to be loved. I don't have to prove my worth. You showed me that. You looked at me, a half-frozen girl in the dirt, and you saw someone worth carrying home." "I saw you," Kyle said simply. "Just you. That was enough." "Then let me choose you back." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the sharp line of his jaw beneath her palm. "Not because I'm grateful, not because I have nowhere else to go, because I want to, because you're the first person who ever looked at me like I mattered, because when I'm with you, I finally feel like myself." "Maren, I love you." The words came out fierce, certain. "I love you, Cale, and I'm done being afraid of it." He kissed her, not gentle, not careful. He kissed her like he'd been waiting 200 years for this exact moment and couldn't bear another second of separation. His hands tangled in her hair, his body pressed against hers. He kissed her like she was air, and he was drowning, like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. Maren kissed him back with everything she had, every year of loneliness, every moment of being unwanted, every time she'd been told she was worthless. She poured it all into the kiss and felt it transform, felt the pain become something bright, something fierce, something that felt terrifyingly like home. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. The courtyard was utterly silent. "Mine," Kyle growled against her lips. The word wasn't possession. It was promise. It was vow. It was everything she'd never dared hope for. "Yours?" she agreed. "I'm yours, Cale. And you're mine." Behind them, she heard Thorn make a strangled sound. The horses shifted nervously, but she didn't turn around, didn't care. "Get out!" Kyle's voice carried without him raising it. "Leave my lands, and don't ever come back." She heard the horses wheeling, the clatter of hooves on stone, the gates groaning open and shut. She didn't watch them go. She'd spent 19 years watching people leave, watching people choose anything, anyone, over her. Now she was the one being chosen, and she was never letting go. "I love you," Cale murmured against her hair. "I've loved you since before I knew your name. I'll love you until the stars burn out." Maren smiled against his chest. "That's a long time," she said. "Not long enough." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Not nearly long enough." For the first time in 19 years, Maren believed him.